Last year, Governor Brewer proposed, and a number of Republican legislators agreed, that we should be doing something called performance funding in our educational system. And basically what that comes down to is all schools get a basic amount of money, possibly what they're getting now or maybe a little bit less, and then the remainder of the money will be doled out to school district and to schools based on how well students perform. Well, a number of us are pretty upset about that because school performance, as I said in the first segment, is based on family income and the income of areas, and it would mean that the schools with the children from wealthy families would get more money than the schools with the kids who live in poverty, and that's ridiculous. They said, well, we're making a balancing here and we're including improvement. I looked through the data and I wrote something about showing how their improvement would do almost nothing to add to it. And a much better job was done by Dr. David Garcia. He's an educational professor at Arizona State University and, by the way, running for superintendent of public instruction here in Arizona. And he went through and did a wonderful scholarly research job to show that you would be giving money to the wealthier schools and school districts, taking money away from the schools where the kids need the most help, and that it was really counterproductive for what we need. Well, interestingly, there's recently come out an article that Governor Brewer and her folks are rethinking the performance funding. Now, I still don't like performance funding, but I'm starting with the good news here. And the good news is they heard what people were saying. They listened to Dr. Garcia, who I know has given presentations to some of the people around Governor Brewer, and they said, okay, we're going to try to rejigger the balance, and we're going to try to give more money to the schools with the low-performing kids, the kids who do lower on the state achievement tests, and less money simply rewarding people from coming from wealthy families where they're privileged kids. And they say that that's what they're doing. I don't know if it's going to turn out that way, but the good thing is enough people were complaining about this and made clear explanations of it that they said, oops, we got to change this. This is too blatant.
Well, I mean, I think this whole practice is questionable. No other state does this, number one. Number two, we're just sort of, trying to figure this out as we go along. Number three, this is not even close to replacing what the legislature has, I'll just say stolen from our school children, since 2008. It's going to be a de minimis amount of money. And what we're really talking about here is taking a business practice, of giving bonuses based on performance, and we're trying to take a business practice and apply it to education. And in general, when that has happened, I think it's been an utter disaster. I don't think bonuses even work in the private sector. As someone who has managed people, the people who are doing good jobs are doing good jobs because they're good employees and they take pride in their work. Giving them a bonus is just a natural outgrowth of something that they're doing anyway. And I would probably make somewhat of the same argument for educators. Educators who are good educators are doing a good job because they believe in what they do and they are dedicated professionals. Giving their schools more money as a carrot hanging out there, is it going to make them do a better job? I don't buy it. And the other thing is, this whole concept has been brought to us again by Craig Barrett. So Mr. Titan of industry, who believes that we can just take business concepts, apply them to the education sector, and who really, I don't think, has a very clear idea of what educators do day in and day out in our schools, and is really just sort of conducting a little experiment here in the state of Arizona.
I spent over 30 years in the classroom, and it's a deep insult to me and to everybody else who has been busting their hump in the classroom day after day after day to say, we'll give you more money and you'll do better. I don't think I can do better than I did, which was my best. And my best was pretty adequate, but if they gave me $20,000 more a year, I would not be a better teacher for that. Some people might be pushed by that a little bit, but not very much. And teachers, I have to say, and I've heard this from so many teachers, I even heard it this morning from a guy who came out to my house, of all things, as a pest inspector, whose wife is a teacher. She got Teacher of the Year award or something like that. And I said, yeah, that's much better than salary, isn't it? She says, she's not worried about the salary. That's the stuff that matters. And there were days when I would go into school and I'd come home at the end of the day and thinking that I maybe will call the district and tell them I don't need to be paid for today. It was so good. Well, I never did that, but that's how you feel. That's the reward. So the idea that you're going to give me more money, teachers are very, very unmercenary people working often for far less than they deserve or far less than they need to live a decent kind of a middle class life. And that's not how we work. And it's just ridiculous and insulting to say we do.
Well, and also it's going to really just measure, what types of kids you have in your school to begin with. And, if there is a growth factor, if you can get those kids to, bump up a little bit, great. But we are not talking about, we're also creating winners and losers again. And one of the things I think we have to stop doing in education in Arizona is fostering this idea that it is acceptable to have winners and losers. That is very much, again, a business practice being applied to education where it absolutely does not belong whatsoever. And so, I think we've been sort of carried away by this concept brought to us by a former corporate business titan who has a lot of power, a lot of influence, is a big donor among the majority party. And I just wish it would stop here and the legislature would, instead of, considering schemes like this, just go back to what we need to do, which is actually increase per pupil funding across the board. $1 billion was cut. We had the deepest cut in the nation. We now have a $1.35 billion surplus in the state budget, and yet you hear nothing from the legislature about actually restoring what they stole from our kids. And instead, we're going to have this, plan. It'll be touted as performance-based funding. I think they're hoping that's how they'll get legislative support for it. And again, even for what it does provide, it's not going to make schools whole. It's not going to provide the same amounts for every child. And it's just blatantly not enough and unfair.
They're pretending they're being generous, and I want to give percentages to what you said. At one point, we had cut 21% from what we were giving 4 years ago. Not that we've stayed in the same place, but cut $1 out of every 5. Now it's a 17% cut, and the only reason that is the courts demanded they put some of the money back in for inflation.
Right.
So I have a suggestion. Let's have them refund all that money. Let's have them then reach something near parity with some other states in terms of the amount of funding, and after the schools are adequately funded, let them then put some bonuses on top. Let them put a cherry on top. Let them give somebody a little bit of reward for something. I won't mind that too much, but please don't pretend you're being generous when you have cut $1 out of every 5 from the way it was 5 years ago. Please, that's absurd.
Right. I mean, I think just a basic that needs to happen first is at least bring the schools back to where they were. Okay, you have the funds there to do that, but I'm afraid we don't have the political will to do it, because what I keep hearing from people is, oh no, this is the new normal. You all have just become so much more efficient. And I'm sorry, not having money to buy enough textbooks, not having money to have enough teachers in classes so that class sizes aren't through the roof, not having enough money so that we don't have to close schools. That's not efficiency. We are at starvation levels, and now they're just going to create more of the Hunger Games for our schools and our school leaders. It's really, I think, offensive and should be shot down, but I keep hearing from legislators that nope, the governor's performance plan is going to make it through this session.
We'll see what happens, but it's not good. What's happening is not good in education in this state. It needs a great deal of reform and change, genuine reform and change.
There needs to be the will to actually invest in our kids.
There are children.
That's right. They only get one chance.